I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. On the screen was a text message that had just come through, a message meant for someone else. Not my name, not our anniversary date, just coordinates to a motel on Route 9 and a heart emoji. The text was from Brandon, my fiancé. My Brandon, who'd been asleep next to me just 20 minutes ago. My vision blurred. I read it 3 times, praying the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. I looked at the bed behind me, the king size we'd picked out together at the Pottery Barn, the one with the Egyptian cotton sheets his mother had given us as an engagement gift. He was still asleep, his chest rising and falling like nothing in the world was wrong, like his entire life wasn't a lie. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. Instead, I walked downstairs, poured myself a glass of wine at 2 in the morning, and sat on our pristine white sectional, the one from the designer showroom downtown, the one we'd both agreed was our future, and stared at the blank wall ahead of me. Everything in this house suddenly felt like a prop in someone else's story. 3 years earlier, life had been different, simpler, better. I was working as a marketing director at a mid-sized tech firm in Charlotte, making decent money, living in a cute 1-bedroom apartment in South End. I had my routines: yoga on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, drinks with my best friend Jennifer on Fridays, Sunday farmers market trips where I'd buy way too much produce and pretend I'd meal prep. I was 32, independent, and genuinely happy with my own company. Then I met Brandon at a networking event in Uptown. He was tall, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from a family with old money. His father owned a chain of country clubs across the Southeast. He worked in real estate development, and when he talked about his projects, his whole face lit up. He had this way of making you feel like the most interesting person in the room, like whatever you were saying mattered deeply to him. When he asked for my number, I actually felt butterflies, real, honest butterflies. Our first 6 months were the kind of relationship you see in movies. He'd surprise me with dinner reservations at restaurants I'd mentioned in passing. He introduced me to his entire friend group within weeks. He drove up to visit my parents in Greensboro without being asked, brought my mom flowers, helped my dad fix the fence. My mother pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Ashley, I've never seen you like this. He's good for you." By month 9, Brandon had moved into my apartment. By month 14, we'd bought a house together, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Myers Park, a neighborhood where every lawn looked like it had been painted green by hand. Cream-colored brick, black shutters, a wraparound porch, the kind of house that appears in real estate brochures. Brandon's mother, Karen, had opinions about everything: the paint colors, the landscaping, the type of kitchen hardware. My mother had warned me about strong mothers-in-law, but I figured we'd make it work. The engagement happened on a Saturday evening in September. We were at Biltmore Forest Country Club, Brandon's club, naturally, having dinner on the terrace overlooking the golf course. He didn't get down on one knee. Instead, he pulled out a 3-carat diamond ring, slipped it onto my finger while I was mid-sip of Pinot Grigio, and said, "I want to spend my life with you, Ashley. Marry me." Simple, direct, perfect. My mother cried when I called her. Jennifer screamed so loud the entire coffee shop turned to look at us. We set a date for the following June. We booked the country club. We hired a wedding planner named Monica who had a clipboard and very strong opinions about color palettes. Everything was moving forward at exactly the right pace. But if I'm being honest, if I'm being completely, brutally honest, there were things I'd started noticing. Small things. The way Brandon would check his phone constantly, even at dinner, his thumbs moving fast across the screen before he'd notice me watching and slip it into his pocket. The nights he'd say he had to work late on a project, and I'd drive past his office building to find it dark, except for the security lights. The way he'd taken a separate credit card for business expenses that I wasn't on, and when I'd asked about it casually, he'd shut down the conversation entirely. My mother had said something the month before the engagement that I'd pushed away. We were in her kitchen, and she was helping me address wedding invitations. She'd put down her pen and looked at me carefully. "Honey," she'd said, "is everything okay with Brandon? You seem, I don't know, less happy than you used to be." I'd laughed it off. "I'm just stressed about wedding planning, Mom. It's a lot." But she wasn't wrong. Somewhere between month 6 and month 20, things had shifted. Brandon had become less present, even when he was physically in the room. He'd be distant, distracted. Once, I'd found a text on his iPad from someone named M that just said, "Miss you. When can we see each other?" When I'd asked him about it, he'd claimed it was his colleague Marcus asking about a work meeting. I'd wanted to believe him, so I did. My mother had said, "He is not your fiancé, not really, not if he's hiding things from you." We'd been sitting in her living room, a week after I'd found that text on the iPad. She'd been direct, the way she always was. "Ashley, sweetheart, I know you love him, but love isn't enough if there's no honesty." I'd gotten angry with her. I'd told her she was being dramatic, that she didn't understand Brandon, that every relationship has rough patches. I'd actually said the words, "You're just being an overprotective mother," and I'd seen her flinch. I'd stood up, told her I didn't want to talk about it anymore, and I'd left. Now, sitting on that white sectional at 2 in the morning, with Brandon's betrayal glowing on my phone screen, I thought about what my mother had said. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there until the sky started turning gray, until I heard Brandon's alarm go off upstairs, until I heard the shower running. I heard him come downstairs, kiss the top of my head like he always did, like nothing was wrong, and say, "Good morning, beautiful. You're up early." I looked up at him, really looked at him. This man I was supposed to marry in 5 months, this man I'd rearranged my entire life around, and I saw someone I didn't recognize at all. "Brandon," I said quietly, "who is M?" His face went pale, his coffee cup froze halfway to his lips, and in that single moment, before he even opened his mouth to lie, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. He put the coffee cup down slowly, his jaw clenched. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just stared at me like I'd asked him something in a language he didn't speak. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. "Brandon." My voice was steady, which surprised me. "Who is M?" He turned away and walked to the sink. He ran water over his hands, even though they weren't dirty. I watched the back of his neck, the way his shoulders tensed under his dress shirt. "It's nobody," he said without turning around. "Just a work contact." "A work contact who misses you? Who wants to see you at a motel on Route 9? The words hung in the kitchen air like something poisonous. He finally turned to face me. His expression had shifted. No more confusion, no more denial, just cold calculation. Like I'd caught him in a game, and now he was deciding whether to keep playing or flip the table. "You went through my phone," he said, not a question. "Your phone texted you while you were sleeping next to me. You still went through it." "Yes, and I'm glad I did." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You know what? I don't have to explain myself to you. We're not married yet. We're not even what, Brandon? Committed? Is that what you were about to say?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Then he grabbed his keys off the counter and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" I called after him. "Out. I need air." "Brandon, wait!" But he was already gone. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the framed photos on the hallway table. I stood there in our pristine kitchen, in our dream house, surrounded by all the things we'd picked out together, and felt something inside me break clean in half. I didn't call my mother. I should have. Instead, I called Jennifer. She was at my house in 40 minutes with a bottle of wine and her lawyer's phone number, which should tell you something about how serious she thought this was. I'd only shown her the text message, but she'd understood immediately what it meant. "He's been cheating," Jennifer said flatly, sitting on the edge of our white sectional. "That's what this is. Ashley, I'm sorry, but that's what this is." "I don't know that for sure." "Yes, you do. You know it. I can see it in your face." She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. "My brother-in-law is a divorce attorney. His name is David Chen. He's the best in Charlotte. I'm going to text you his number." "I'm not getting divorced," I said, hearing how stupid it sounded even as the words left my mouth. "We're not even married yet." "But you will be if you don't handle this now." Jennifer set down her wine glass and looked at me directly. "Ashley, you need to talk to a lawyer before you talk to him again. You need to know your rights. You need to know what happens to the house, the money, everything. Because if he's been cheating, if he's been hiding things, then he's been lying about other things too, probably financial things." My stomach dropped. Financial things. The separate credit card, the business expenses I'd never seen receipts for. "What if he's stolen from me?" I whispered. "Then you need to know about it before you sign anything, before you make any decisions." Jennifer squeezed my hand. "Call David, today, please." I called David Chen at 2 o'clock that afternoon. His office was in an upscale building downtown, and he could see me at 4. 4 hours to sit in my house and think about all the ways my life was unraveling. Brandon didn't come home. At 4:15, I was sitting across from David Chen in a conference room with glass walls and a view of downtown Charlotte. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Tell me everything," he said, opening a legal pad. So I did. I told him about the text message, about the iPad text from M, about the separate credit card, about the way Brandon had been distant, distracted, checking his phone constantly, about his sudden late nights at work, about my mother's warning that he wasn't trustworthy. I told him everything, except the part where I'd been too stubborn to listen. David took notes. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me seriously. "I need to see that text message," he said, "and I need you to gather every financial document you have access to. Bank statements, credit card statements, mortgage documents, investment accounts, everything. Do you have access to his emails?" "I don't think so. I mean, I could try." "Don't," he said quickly. "Don't access anything without my guidance. We need to be very careful about how we proceed, legally speaking. But I want you to get every document that has both your names on it, or any document in your possession that relates to your joint finances. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Do it tonight. While he's not home, put it all in a box. Bring it to me tomorrow morning." He paused. "Has he been abusive to you, physically or verbally?" "No, not physically." "Verbally? Has he called you names, threatened you, made you feel unsafe?" I thought about how he'd spoken to me that morning, how cold his eyes had been, how he'd denied everything and then just left, like I was nothing. "I don't think so," I said. "Not yet." "Okay, we're going to take this one step at a time. First, we get the documents. Then we understand the financial picture. Then we decide what your options are. Do you want to try to salvage this relationship, or do you want to end it?" The question felt impossible. 2 days ago, I would have said salvage it without hesitation. But 2 days ago, I didn't know my fiancé was texting another woman about meeting at a motel. "I don't know," I said. "That's okay. You don't have to know right now, but I want you to be prepared for whatever comes next, which means knowing your rights and protecting your assets." When I got home, I did what David asked. I went through every drawer, every file, every cabinet. I found bank statements that showed deposits I didn't recognize, thousands of dollars going into accounts I'd never heard of. I found a second credit card bill hidden in the office desk, with charges to restaurants and hotels across the state. I found a separate phone bill for a line that wasn't in either of our names. The more I dug, the more I found. And the clearer it became that Brandon hadn't just been cheating. He'd been building an entire parallel life. I packed it all into a box, and I sat on the floor of our bedroom, the bedroom with the Egyptian cotton sheets, and I cried until I couldn't anymore. He didn't come home that night either. The next morning, I brought the box to David's office. He spent 3 hours going through everything while I sat in the waiting room, drinking terrible coffee and staring at my phone, waiting for Brandon to text or call. He didn't. When David finished, he asked me to come back into his office and close the door. "Ashley," he said carefully, "I need you to prepare yourself for what I'm about to tell you. Your fiancé has been conducting significant financial transactions that you were not aware of. There are 4 separate accounts in his name only. There are charges totaling approximately $120,000 in the last 6 months alone to various hotels and restaurants. And there's something else. He turned his computer monitor toward me and pulled up an image of a document. "This is a property deed," he said. "A condo in Wilmington, North Carolina. Purchased 3 months ago. It's in his name only, but there are utility bills addressed to him and another person, a woman named Michelle Garrett." My vision blurred. Michelle. M. "He bought a house for her?" I heard myself ask from very far away. "It appears so. I've done some preliminary research. Michelle Garrett is a real estate agent, age 28, employed by Coastal Properties in Wilmington. She has an Instagram account where she's posted photos from what appears to be that condo." "Has she posted photos of them together?" David hesitated. "Yes. I didn't ask to see them. I couldn't. Instead, I sat very still and tried to breathe." "What do I do?" I asked. "We have several options," David said. "Given that you're not yet married, North Carolina law treats this differently than a divorce would. However, you do have rights to any property acquired during the engagement if you can prove commingling of funds or other factors. The house you own together, the one in Myers Park, is in both your names. You would almost certainly retain that or receive equivalent compensation. We can file for a dissolution of the engagement and begin the process of separating your finances." "Can I take the house?" I asked. "Possibly. We'll need to determine the mortgage situation, the down payment source, everything. But yes, that's a realistic outcome." "I want the house," I said. "I want him to have nothing. I want him to understand what he did." David looked at me with something like pity. "Ashley, I understand you're angry right now, and you should be. But I want to caution you against making decisions based on anger. This process is going to be difficult. It's going to be long, and it's going to be expensive. Let's focus on protecting yourself first. Revenge can come later, if you still want it." But I did still want it. And when I left his office, I had a clear plan. I drove straight to my parents' house in Greensboro. I didn't call ahead. I just drove, 2 hours straight. And when I pulled into their driveway, I sat in my car and called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My mother answered the door before I even knocked. She took one look at me and pulled me inside. "Tell me," she said. So I told her everything. About the text message, about Michelle, about the condo in Wilmington, about the credit cards and the hidden accounts, about David Chen and the documents I'd found, and about how I'd ignored her warning because I was too stubborn and too in love and too desperate to believe that the man I'd chosen was a liar. My mother didn't say, "I told you so." She just held me while I cried, and then she made me tea, and then she called my father, and then they both sat with me in their living room while I explained what came next. "We're filing for a dissolution of the engagement," I said, using David's words. "Brandon has to return my engagement ring, and we're going to fight for the house. I'm going to make sure he loses everything, the same way he made me lose everything." My father, who rarely spoke, finally said, "Ashley, losing everything isn't winning. It's just losing everything. Make sure you're doing this for you, not against him." But I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure of anything except that I needed Brandon to pay for what he'd done. 3 weeks later, David served him with the dissolution papers. Brandon's response came within days. He contested every single claim. He said the house was his, that he'd paid the down payment with inheritance money from his grandmother. He said the condo was an investment property, nothing more. He said Michelle was just a business associate and a friend. He claimed I'd gone through his private documents without permission, and that anything I'd found was inadmissible. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd sent me a text message admitting to the affair. Because when his lawyer demanded to know where I'd gotten the information about Michelle, David showed him the original text, the one about the motel, the one Brandon had meant for someone else. And suddenly, Brandon's denials meant nothing. His lawyer immediately requested mediation. Brandon wanted to settle. He was willing to give me the house, he said. He was willing to divide the investments equally. He was willing to do almost anything, as long as the affair didn't become public knowledge. I almost agreed. But then I did something I shouldn't have. I went to Wilmington. I drove down on a Saturday afternoon and found the condo, a modern beach-style property with a wraparound deck and an ocean view. I sat in my car across the street and watched Brandon's truck pull into the driveway. And then I watched him get out and walk to the door where Michelle was waiting. She was younger than me, much younger. She was blonde and tan and wearing a sundress, and when Brandon kissed her, she laughed like she didn't have a care in the world, like she didn't know that she was helping destroy someone's life, like she didn't know that the man kissing her had just tried to take everything from the woman he'd promised to marry. I took a photo. I don't know why, I just did. Then I drove back to Charlotte and called David. I want everything, I told him. I want the house. I want the investments. I want the condo. I want him to have nothing but the clothes on his back and the debts in his name. And I want to make sure everyone knows why. Ashley, David started. No, you said revenge could come later. Well, it's later, and I want it. The mediation fell apart. Brandon's lawyer went to court arguing that I was being unreasonable, that I was trying to punish his client for infidelity rather than seeking a fair settlement. But David had something better than arguments. He had evidence. He had the text message. He had the financial records showing the condo purchase. He had the Instagram photos of Michelle at the property. And he had me, sitting in the witness chair, describing in detail every lie Brandon had told me. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, listened to everything. And then she ruled. I got the house. I got 70% of the joint investments. I got the car. And Brandon got ordered to pay me $75,000 in damages for the unauthorized use of joint funds for his affair. As for the condo in Wilmington, the judge ordered it sold and the proceeds split equally, since it had technically been purchased during our engagement, using funds we'd accumulated together. When the gavel came down, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph. Relief. Like a weight I'd been carrying without realizing it had finally been lifted. Brandon's mother called me that night. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. How could you do this to him? Karen said, her voice shaking with rage. He's your fiancé. He made a mistake. He made a lot of mistakes, I said calmly, and he made the choice to lie about all of them. That's on him, not me. You're going to regret this. You're going to wake up alone and miserable. Maybe, but at least I'll be alone in my own house. And I won't be married to a liar. I hung up. 3 months later, I was sitting in my Myers Park Colonial, my house now, the deed in my name, when my mother came to visit. She brought flowers for my new dining room table and a bottle of expensive wine. I'm proud of you, she said, setting down the flowers. For what? For being too stubborn to listen to you? For almost marrying a cheater? For turning into a bitter person who wanted revenge? For surviving it, she said simply. For making hard choices, for taking care of yourself when it would have been easier to fall apart. We sat on the back porch, not the white sectional, I'd sold that immediately, and watched the sun set over the backyard I now owned entirely. Do you regret it? My mother asked. The fight, the lawsuit, all of it? I thought about Brandon, about Michelle, about the life I'd imagined that had turned out to be a lie, about the months of legal battles and depositions and courtroom testimony, about the weight of anger I'd carried like a stone in my chest. No, I said finally, because at least now I know the truth, and the truth, no matter how painful, is better than a beautiful lie. My mother squeezed my hand, and we sat in silence as the sky turned orange and then purple and then black. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe.